This here is the choke point, the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal. The fish would have to come through here, which is why this water is electrified. The US Army Corps of Engineers have put a giant electric fence underwater.
Technically, the Romeoville electric barrier in the Chicago Canal is charged so strongly that no organism should be able to get through it. But recently, sonar picked up something unimaginable. A school of fish used the wake generated by a passing barge to glide straight through the electrified zone without feeling a thing. Scientists call this the Trojan Horse Effect, a hidden doorway created by the canal itself. The footage is alarming, but what worries researchers even more is what comes next.
Wildlife biologists are warning about an invasive fish species that threatens to permanently alter the Great Lakes ecosystem.
This is the story of a super ecosystem organism evolving day by day, growing powerful enough to dismantle the entire ecosystem it invades. The Romeoville Gateway. In the year 1900, Chicago faced a serious crisis. Wastewater was flowing directly into Lake Michigan, the source of drinking water for millions of people. The engineers of that era made a bold decision. They dug a massive canal and reversed the entire flow of the Chicago River, forcing polluted water to move toward the Mississippi River instead of the lake. The city survived, but that single act unintentionally opened a passageway that connected two enormous ecosystems that were never meant to touch each other: the Mississippi to the south and the Great Lakes to the north. From that moment on, any creature living in the Mississippi watershed could follow the current and move straight toward the Great Lakes. To prevent an ecological disaster, humans chose the strongest solution they could build immediately. They electrified an entire stretch of the canal. Beneath the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal, dozens of steel electrodes were installed along the riverbed, constantly pumping direct current into the water. Whenever a fish approached, its entire body would convulse, forcing it to turn back. The system acted as an invisible electric wall, designed to stop any living creature from advancing farther upstream. But theory stays still while nature does not. When an electric field is maintained in the same location for decades, it becomes more than a barrier. It turns into a harsh selection gate. Weaker fish, and those more sensitive to electricity, are stunned or die before they can reproduce. The stronger ones survive and pass on their traits. Year after year, the fish living below the barrier began to change. They became tougher, more tolerant of the shocks, and more persistent with every attempt. The electric gate slowly turned into a daily survival test. That was also when Asian carp appeared. Originally introduced to clean fish farms, they escaped into natural waterways and spread up the Illinois River at an alarming rate. In many sections, they now dominate almost the entire biomass. By the time they approached Romeoville, they faced not only an electric barrier, but a man-made environment that pushed them to adapt even faster. Every failed attempt at crossing still left an advantage for the strongest individuals. The invasion was not slowing down. It was accelerating. Meanwhile, on land, the Great Lakes states wanted to permanently close the Chicago Canal to protect their multi-billion-dollar ecosystem. Illinois insisted that was impossible because the barge traffic running through the canal was the economic lifeline of the state. Neither side would budge. The canal remained open. The fish kept advancing, and the electric barrier, powerful enough to make the water tremble, was forced to stand alone as the final line of defense, until the first major failure arrived, the 17-minute incident. On a morning in October of 2025, the Romeoville barrier was operating as usual. Then, within seconds, the warning lights began to flash repeatedly. The system had switched to its backup generator, and for some unknown reason, the voltage suddenly dropped. Not enough to shut off completely, but enough to create a gap no one ever wanted to see. That gap lasted exactly 17 minutes. Under the surface, the black and white underwater cameras, normally only able to detect movement, recorded a large dark shape pushing against the current. At first, the technician assumed it was debris, but debris is always carried downstream. This shape was moving forward. Then it split into several smaller shapes. They moved close together, quickly and decisively. When the voltage finally returned to normal, the images disappeared. and so did the fish. The operations team immediately gave the event a name. They called it Operation Phantom Cross because everything happened too fast, too quietly, and no one could clearly see what had slipped through the electric gate. Hours later, a rapid response crew arrived. They used specialized boats that emit controlled pulses to stun fish and bring them to the surface so they could locate the crossing group. After 6 hours of continuous searching, they found only one fish, a 22-pound bighead carp. It was swimming freely, only 12 miles from Lake Michigan. Yet what troubled everyone even more was that the sensors earlier had detected an entire group, but the team had caught only one. The fish was taken to a laboratory. From the internal structure of its body, scientists discovered it had lived for many months just below the barrier, in the Des Plaines River, as if it had been waiting for the exact moment the voltage weakened. It had not wandered there by accident. It had been waiting. And this was not the first time something like this happened. In 2009, a bighead carp was found below the barrier. In 2010, another was discovered above it, in a small lake near Chicago. For years, water samples taken upstream repeatedly showed traces of carp DNA, but those signs were always explained away. People said it could be bird droppings or contamination from passing boats. Those explanations no longer hold. Piece by piece, the picture is becoming clear. The electric gate is not as sealed as we once believed. The fish have crossed before, possibly many times. And the voltage drop this time is simply the clearest evidence that the only line of defense humans rely on is beginning to crack. The Trojan Horse Effect. After the incident, the technical team began reviewing all the data from the previous months. This was when they noticed something unusual, something everyone had overlooked. It did not come from the fish. It came from the barges traveling through the canal every single day. Each time a cargo vessel hundreds of meters long passed through the barrier zone, it pushed an enormous mass of water forward. The water beneath the hull was pressed down. The water behind the vessel spun into a strong wake, and the space directly under and behind the ship became very different from the surrounding water. Normally, people saw this as nothing more than a simple flow effect. But when combined with the electric barrier, the shielded layer of water under the passing vessel created a completely new problem. According to camera data, whenever a barge passed, the water directly beneath the hull and near the bottom of the canal showed a significant drop in electrical strength. It was as if a thin protective sheet had been stretched between the fish and the electric source, reducing the shock noticeably. What made this worse was that Asian carp did not simply drift slowly behind the vessels. They followed the exact shielded pocket of water and used the swirling wake at the tail of the ship to slip through without receiving the full force of the electric field. In other words, the barges were unintentionally creating a safe passage through the electric wall, a passage no one designed, no one anticipated, and no one could control. The technical team called it the Trojan Horse Effect. Just like the ancient story, the invaders did not break through the gate by force. They hid behind something enormous brought in by humans and silently slipped through without anyone noticing. When the engineers reviewed dozens of barge passages over the following months, they discovered a disturbing pattern. Each time a vessel passed through the barrier zone, the cameras would capture faint blurred shapes following behind it. The moment lasted only a few seconds, yet those seconds were more than enough for a fast and powerful species that had already become familiar with electrical shocks. Worse still, this was the kind of failure the barrier could not fix. Increasing the voltage would not solve the issue because the ships themselves acted as natural shields. Reducing barge traffic was impossible because the Chicago Canal was one of the most critical transportation routes in Illinois. The sensor system could not distinguish between harmless debris and a dangerous fish moving inside a high-speed wake. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. The Romeoville barrier did not have one weakness. It had two. One came from electrical failure. The other came from the very shipping activity that kept the canal alive. Asian carp did not need a blackout to cross. They could slip through at any moment if they caught the exact second a vessel passed overhead. And if a single fish managed to get through, it would never be just about one fish. It would be an entire ecosystem put at risk. The rise of the superfish. The repeated incidents forced researchers to re-examine every piece of data they had collected on Asian carp over the years. The more they looked, the more alarming the picture became. The fish were no longer the same as those seen 20 years ago. They were larger, stronger, and seemed to be adapting in ways no one expected. In many areas of the Illinois River, the number of hybrids between silver carp and bighead carp had increased quickly. At first, this seemed like a normal consequence of two species living in the same river, but the shape and behavior of the hybrids revealed something different. They surpassed both parents. They swam harder, reacted faster, and were far less affected by sound, light, or even mild electrical pulses. Such conditions had always frightened carp in the past. When scientists examined the number of eggs produced each season, they found something even more troubling. A single female could lay hundreds of thousands of eggs each year, and hybrids often produced even more. This meant that even a small group slipping past the barrier could establish a new population in an extremely short time, faster than humans could respond. There was more. When teams monitored the carp near the barrier, they noticed that the largest individuals almost always appeared in the areas with the strongest electrical fields. This led to a disturbing question. Was the harsh environment near the barrier selecting for the toughest fish? The weak ones turned back or died, while the strong ones repeated their attempts. Year after year, this could create a population far more resistant to the shocks the barrier produced. Onshore, field crews became increasingly concerned when they began capturing unusually large individuals during routine surveys. These oversized carp, weighing 30, 40, and even 50 pounds, were not only stronger, but also able to cut through whirlpools that previously disoriented them. Researchers called this the leading edge effect, where a harsh environment produces exceptional individuals, a new generation stronger than any ecological model had predicted. The most important realization was that older projections were no longer accurate. Charts showing the speed of the carp's spread were too slow compared to real data. The number of juvenile carp captured was always higher than expected. Signs of carp further upstream appeared months or even years earlier than predicted. All of this pointed to a conclusion no one wanted to accept. The fish were evolving faster than humans could reinforce the barrier. The problem was not simply that the carp were numerous. It was not simply that they were strong swimmers. The real problem was that every year produced a new generation better suited to overcome whatever obstacles humans built. A $7 billion ecological shockwave. If the Romeoville barrier fails, the first place to suffer will not be the small rivers downstream. It will be the Great Lakes, the largest freshwater system on the planet. With its enormous size, its role as a drinking water source for 40 million people, and its $7 billion commercial and recreational fishing economy, this region is the beating heart of the American Midwest. And the most frightening part is this. A single small group of carp entering the system could change everything forever. Contrary to what many people think, Asian carp do not need hundreds of individuals to begin causing damage. Only 50 to 100 adults finding shelter among the warm nearshore vegetation is enough for them to begin reproducing. A single female can release up to 1 million eggs in one season. When hybrids appear stronger and better able to withstand cold water, the explosion in numbers becomes even faster. What worries scientists the most is that the carp do not need to move into the deep, cold parts of the lakes. Even though the lakes are vast like inland seas, these fish do not live in the open center. They take over bays, river mouths, and shallow coves where the water is warmer and food is abundant. These are the exact areas where most native fish lay their eggs. Once carp occupy these places, the life cycle of native species is cut off at the source. From there, the ecosystem begins to collapse step by step. Small fish starve because plankton is consumed by the carp. Predatory fish lose their food supply and decline in number. Birds and mammals that depend on fish begin to disappear. The lake slowly shifts into a murky, low, oxygen body of water with far less life. But the disaster would not end with biology alone. Tourism around the lakes, a $16 billion industry, would take a heavy blow. Silver carp are known for leaping 3 meters into the air when startled. On the Illinois River, countless people have been injured by fish slamming into their faces. Now imagine that happening on Lake Michigan, where millions of people kayak, operate boats, and participate in fishing tournaments every year. Just a few serious incidents could drive visitors away. Property values along the lake shore, something many states rely on, could also drop sharply. No one wants to live beside water filled with large jumping fish or near a lake that loses its clear natural color due to harmful algal blooms triggered by ecosystem collapse. What makes the situation worse is this: we might not detect the invasion immediately. Lake Michigan is so vast that a small group of carp could hide for years before growing large enough to be noticed. By the time humans realize there is a problem, it could already be too late. This is why the Great Lakes states have raised the alarm and pushed to close the canal for more than a decade. But while they want to protect a multi-billion-dollar resource, Illinois depends on the canal as a vital shipping route. Both sides are right, and it is exactly this stalemate that makes the risk grow larger each year. As the carp move closer to Chicago, the Great Lakes move closer to the edge of a biological crisis. And if one day the sensors report that carp have entered the lake, then barriers, models, debates, and warnings will all become meaningless, because once the carp enter the Great Lakes, there is no way to remove them. Brandon Road. The fear of a Great Lakes invasion forced Chicago's authorities to create a solution stronger than the electric barrier. This was the birth of the Brandon Road Project, a new fortress located downstream from Romeoville, at a narrow point where the river constricts like the neck of a bottle. It is the only place where humans can build a multi-layer defense system instead of relying on a single electric wall. Unlike the Romeoville barrier, which depends entirely on electricity, Brandon Road uses 3 completely different layers of protection. The first is sound. Giant underwater speakers emit noise so powerful that fish are forced to turn back immediately. For Asian carp, which are extremely sensitive to sound, this acts like an invisible wall, pushing them away before they can approach. The second layer is a bubble curtain. Thousands of air bubbles rise from the bottom of the channel, creating a bright white wall that disrupts the fish's senses and prevents them from orienting themselves. The bubble curtain also blocks eggs and larvae carried by the current, something the electric barrier cannot control at all. The third and most important layer is the flushing lock. Normally, when a barge passes through a lock, the water on both sides mixes, unintentionally carrying eggs and young fish upstream. At Brandon Road, the lock functions like a decontamination chamber. Before a vessel is allowed to continue, all the water inside the chamber is drained downstream and replaced with clean upstream water. This means not a single drop of potentially contaminated water is allowed to pass through, whether it contains adult fish, larvae, or eggs. If Romeoville is a fence, Brandon Road is a military base. But there is one problem: it is not ready. Even though construction has begun, the entire system will not be completed until the year 2032. This means that for almost an entire decade, humans will still rely on the electric barrier alone, a barrier that has already proven it can fail due to a single 17-minute malfunction. Meanwhile, political conflict continues. One side wants to close the canal completely, accepting the enormous cost of $18 to $25 billion and the reconstruction of Chicago's entire drainage network. The other side says this is impossible because millions of tons of cargo move through the canal every year. The roads cannot handle the load, transportation costs would skyrocket, and Illinois' economy would take a direct hit. The outcome is predictable. Neither side yields. Brandon Road is being built, but slowly. The electric barrier remains but is fragile. And between these two systems lies a dangerous window of time, a window during which the carp needs to succeed only once. In the end, everything returns to a question that has been avoided for years. Are we willing to close the gateway our ancestors opened? To protect the largest freshwater system on Earth, humans may have to sacrifice a key transportation route, spend tens of billions of dollars, and alter the structure of a city more than a century old. Or we can continue relying on an electric barrier that has repeatedly shown it is not perfect. And the decision must be made now, at a moment when the carp are standing at the doorstep of the Great Lakes and the invasion has never been closer.